the rest of it.
Oh.
All right, we are live. Welcome everyone to this pop-up episode of the Gunner Technology Livestream. We're going to be talking about a pretty hot topic right now, Cambridge Analytica and the various associated parties. So just to give a brief overview of what Cambridge Analytica is supposed to be involved in, basically they are a firm out of the UK whose core business is analyzing vast amounts of user data and determining psychological profiles based off of that user data, and then linking that psychological profile to various associated attributes. So the example I gave to Cody earlier, and I don't know if this is actual or not, but it seems to be something that kind of makes sense. So there's a show on, I think it was HBO, and it used to be on, with Gabriel Byrne from The Usual Suspects, and it was called In Treatment. And the entire show was basically, I think it was a nightly show. And I think each night the show focused on a different patient that Gabriel Byrne had. So my hypothesis was a lot of the psychological metrics they used are based on the big 5 personality traits, which is openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. Ocean is how you remember that. So neuroticism, people who are high in neuroticism are, you know, your typical stressed out neurotic person, basically. So my hypothesis was those people would be more likely to like the show In Treatment on Facebook. So that's something that could be brought out by this data. And what Cambridge Analytica is in trouble for, in hot water for, is that they used Facebook data that was given to them by a professor who had acquired it by somewhat underhanded means. And I say somewhat because, and this is maybe the first topic we should talk about, there isn't actually any evidence that he did anything wrong beyond possibly stretching the definition of used for academic purposes. So what this professor did, and I'll throw it over to you, Cody, for your take on all this. But what he did is he developed an application that I think might have given you the big 5 scores for your personality. I think that's actually what the application did. And so he had people from Mechanical Turk take this big 5 personality test and then install an application on Facebook. And the application on Facebook, and this was a loophole on Facebook's side, not only got access to the 270,000 or so people who took this test for $1 or $2 from Mechanical Turk, but they also got access to, the number was 50 million associated profiles, so your friends' profiles. But it turns out that 20 million of those had so little data associated with them that they're functionally useless. So they got access to 30 million additional profiles through these 270,000 Mechanical Turk test takers. And then the professor, I don't think he actually sold it to Cambridge Analytica. I think there was an $800,000 payment from Cambridge Analytica that was used to pay the 270,000 people from Mechanical Turk to take the test and install the application. So that's where the crux of the allegations comes from, is the fact that Cambridge Analytica got access to this data that was supposed to be used for academic purposes and then used that data to supposedly get Trump elected and to get Brexit passed, which in my mind is complete nonsense, but take that and run with it however you want to take it.
Sure. So let me try to do the explain it like I'm 5 angle. So basically, there was company A, and company A said, we have this really cool formula where if we have all this data about people, we can determine which of those people are likely to do certain things. And I'll use non-political examples. So if you give us a lot of data about people, we can tell you which people are likely to order pizza. And they also had another thing. If you give us a lot of data about people, we can determine what things will motivate those people to do certain things, like order pizza. So they have this giant algorithm or formula, 2 of them, that says we can build a profile based on data, user data, that will identify pizza likers, people who are likely to like pizza. And we're able to identify certain things that will motivate these people to buy pizza. So for example, the smell of pepperoni may motivate these people to buy pizza. Then you have, I'm just gonna say company B. The problem with company A is they have this formula to do all this stuff with all this cool data, but they don't actually have the data. So they're like, how do we get this data? So they go to company B and they say, hey, company B, it looks like you make apps. So can you make us an app to help us get this data? And company B says, sure, yeah, absolutely. We can help you get this data because we write apps and we write Facebook apps. So company B develops an application, much like the applications that I'm sure everyone has seen on Facebook, that says something like, find out which superhero you are, find out what personality type you are, find out who your Facebook twin is. All these things that, I mean, just that appear on everyone's timeline. That's the type of app that company B develops.
I don't think that's actually right, though. I have to catch you there. I don't think that's actually right. I think he had the application that was separate, that was the Big 5 personality test, and then they installed the app on Facebook that allowed them to get access to the data to associate with the results of that personality test. It wasn't actually a personality test on Facebook.
My Virtual Life was the app. That was the app that was in question. It's called My Virtual Life.
Which was the actual test itself?
Yes, that was it. That was an actual Facebook app that appeared on Facebook.
Okay, I'll stand corrected there. But go ahead. So company B develops this app that...
Right. And so basically, it's one of those things where in order to take the personality quiz or whatever the quiz is, you have to connect with Facebook to take this quiz, right? And so by connecting with Facebook, and I'm sure everyone out there has seen this. Hey, Facebook, this app is requesting access to your Facebook profile to do X, Y, and Z. And so it actually lists out, if no one ever pays any attention to it, but it actually says what the app wants access to. It'll say like your profile data, your photo, and your friends, or whatever. It actually has to list it out. And so you approve that. And by approving that, you're giving that application access to certain parts of your data, whatever you agreed to, whether that was, again, profile information like the place you live, or your friends, blah, 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 blah. And so by doing that, you're already giving that application a certain amount of data. Now, according to Facebook's terms of use, they're allowed to use that data, but they're not allowed to store it. They're not allowed to like keep it around and give it to other people. They can use it for whatever purpose the application is to serve, but they can't like sell it or repurpose it for another company. So just keep that in mind. So then you take this quiz, in this My Virtual Life, it was a personality.
Yeah, but it actually was. You didn't take the test through Facebook. My Digital Life was actually just to get the data. It was basically just you allowed this company to get your data, and then you also took an associated personality test through Mechanical Turk.
But you had to sign in with Facebook to take the
right. I'm just saying, like, there was no app that people used. Like, the application they installed was an application strictly to get their data. There was no functionality beyond, I want to give this company my data to associate with this test they had me take. That's
right. But my understanding was in order to actually take the survey, you had to sign in with Facebook, which was kind of the bait and switch. Like,
yeah, I just mean like the app itself wasn't. No, but I think the app itself wasn't through Facebook. Like, I don't think there was a this is your Big 5 personality. Like, post this to your Facebook wall. The results of your Big 5 personality test.
Because I thought either way,
yeah. Regardless, it's kind of moot. But the interesting thing is, the purpose of the application was explicitly to give them access to your Facebook data.
Right. Exactly. Which, by the way, that is the express purpose of these Find Your Facebook Twins, find out what superhero you are.
Exactly.
They're all designed.
That's sort of the bigger point here, is that all of these applications explicitly want access to your Facebook data.
Right.
And hundreds of thousands of people are willing to give these applications explicit access to their Facebook data.
Right. So company B developed this application, and in order to take the quiz, you had to sign in with Facebook. Whether it actually published the results to Facebook is another matter, but you actually had to sign in with Facebook, which gives that app access to your data. So the thing that company B did that was incorrect or against Facebook's terms of service was they kept it. They kept that data. They're not supposed to keep that data. So then what they did was after you completed the survey, they took your personality traits and they matched it up. They augmented what Facebook already gave them to create, a super set of data based on both what Facebook had already had and based on what the survey told them. And then again, it had access to your friends. So it may not be able to access all the information that your friends had, but it can access some of the information your friends allow, and it can make assumptions. For example, we are who we hang out with, right? So they can make assumptions about people who I hung out with based on my personality and my Facebook profile. So then, as Derry mentioned, there was Mechanical Turk. So company A has this cool formula that can do all this stuff with this data. Company B has this way to get all the data, but they don't have the users to take the survey. So company B hires company C, which is basically AWS's or Amazon, an Amazon service called Mechanical Turk, where you can pay people, as we've talked about on the show, a nominal fee to do a task. In this case, take the survey. You take the survey, you get $1, you get $2, whatever. So they paid a bunch of people to take the survey. And in so by take these 160,000 people by taking the survey, they got all this profile data on those 160,000 people and some data on their friends. So now you can link company C all the way back to company A. And then you have company A, which develops this huge profile, like an expanded profile based on all these people. And they can really tell who likes pizza and what is going to motivate them to buy pizza. And so the only thing that was nefarious in all of that, the only thing that was even remotely nefarious was what company B did with the data, which was to kind of give it away to another company. Everything else about it was totally on the up and up. And what company B did is store the data, which Facebook, by the way, really has no way of knowing if the company does it or not. It's kind of like an honor system. Like, hey, don't keep our data. Like, don't keep our data or we won't let you use our API anymore. It's kind of like a self-policing type policy.
And if I could just add in there real quick, there's absolutely no reason they even needed to store the data. Like, there's no reason they couldn't work with that data in real time and build everything out. So even that outrage is completely misplaced.
Well, the company A could have worked with the data in real time, but and that's where they screwed up. If company A had done this themselves, rather than get the data from company B, it would be totally legit.
Well, that's to me, that's a quibble, because that's like one minor step removed from just saying, okay, well, just give us access to your app.
That's right, and so that's what I was saying. It's a minor offense, and it's something that, by the way, companies do all the time. Companies,
yeah, and when Facebook said, and well, I guess this is another point of contention, because there are claims that they didn't delete the data, which I'm slightly skeptical of, because the claims are there were hundreds of gigabytes of data. The average Facebook profile couldn't be more than 100 kilobytes. Like the time series data for the entirety of the money supply on a weekly basis for the past 40 years is, I think it was 40 kilobytes when I downloaded it. So if a profile is 100 kilobytes, which is way larger than it actually is, that'd probably be, for 300,000, that'd be like 30 gigabytes. Yeah, and they're saying that there are hundreds of gigabytes of profile data around. Maybe it's images, I don't know.
I would say if they're storing images or videos.
But there's no reason they would store images. I don't know. The whole thing seems somewhat absurd, because I think the outrage is entirely misplaced. I think the outrage needs to fall entirely at the door of Facebook and Facebook's users.
Well, yeah, and that's kind of what I'm. When you put it when you framed it like I did, like this company has used this, like, because it's when you add politics into this that it gets inflammatory. Up until this point, I've used pizza as my example, in which case you're probably saying, what's the big deal? Don't telemarketers do that same thing? They call me all the time trying to get information from me to figure out, you know, what shows I'm likely to watch or what food I'm likely to eat. That's exactly right. That's exactly
and company B is currently using all this data in the consumer realm as well.
Correct. Correct.
I mean, there's applicability outside of the political spectrum, like you said, but the outrage comes when it's used for political purposes.
Right.
But even that outrage is slightly misplaced if we look at the history of politics do you call it marketing in politics? Marketing politicians.
I guess you would call it campaign research. I mean, like that's. I mean, yeah, it's nothing new. This is what pollsters do: is they try to build a psychological profile of voters to determine whose mind can be changed and how they can change it. Because that's all campaign politics is all about, is identifying whose mind can be changed, how we can change it, and the people who already think the way we do, how do we make sure they get to the polls? Those are the 3 pillars of campaign politics. And so that's all we're doing, except we're kind of virtualizing it in a way, but it's already been virtualized for such a long time that it's kind of one of those things where we're piggybacking off the outrage of the Russian scandal. And we kind of get all worked up into a frenzy because anything that has to do with anything that hints of unduly influencing politics kind of sets off a powder keg right now. Because I guarantee you the Democrats had firms that did this, just not as successfully as this particular firm did.
Well, the word is that the Democrats had used their platform to look at retroactive data for voting patterns. That was their big push, was to look at the sort of the interesting thing with this is that it's a predictive algorithm insofar as you're trying to sway voters who you don't necessarily know how they're going to vote. Whereas Democrats tried to get the voters they knew how they knew how they were going to vote out to vote, basically.
Right.
The interesting thing that company B can do is say, and it is really interesting, as nefarious as it may be, but you can basically pull all of this data and say, here's this county in Iowa where there seems to be a preponderance of people who are both highly neurotic and highly interested in the Second Amendment. And we've found through our research that advertisements that play upon fears about protection and the ability of owning a gun to protect yourself against people who are breaking into your home, for example, advertisements that play that angle up tend to sway those kinds of voters tremendously to get out there and vote for candidates who seem to be in favor of the Second Amendment. So that's entirely different than saying this county was heavily Democratic, especially in this zip code. So let's put a bunch of boots on the ground in this zip code to get the voters out.
Right. The Democrats focused on the 3rd pillar, which is getting people they knew were going to vote for, that knew were likely to vote for them, out to the polls. They focused on the 3rd pillar. In this case, Cambridge Analytica focused on the first 2 pillars. Who is likely to have their minds changed, and how do we change it? And, one of the examples was almost exactly what I was talking about earlier in our conversations. Was they identified like manufacturer workers, steel workers, things like that, and steel workers that were still employed and unemployed. And so they identified these people as being targets for fear and anger ads. So because they've seen their industry shrinking, they're fearful that their job may go away. And if it already has gone away, they're angry that their job went away. So they would show these people like video-based ads that would show like a steel or a manufacturing plant in Mexico, and being like, wonder where your job's going? Here, it went south of the border. And then it would say Hillary Clinton wants to expand that and give more of your jobs to Mexico. But Donald Trump will bring the jobs back to you, and he'll keep your job safe. So it was identifying people who were likely to be motivated by fear or anger, and then delivering them an ad that would play on that fear or anger. And it's very effective, but that's marketing for you. I mean, that's what it is.
Yeah, and none of this is new. I mean, we've known about the Big Five's relation to the political spectrum for like a decade now. We know that, and Jonathan Haidt, I think, was the first one to delineate between sort of left-leaning and right-leaning politics, and what the various factors are on the Big Five scale, and what leads to someone being more left-leaning and being more right-leaning. Like openness is a big predictor for being left-leaning.
Right.
And
fear and distrust is a big conservative.
Which basically you can compress that under neuroticism. Pretty much.
Right. Exactly. Which is really interesting. And by the way, I think we should clarify one thing that the media is just getting totally wrong. We've seen this in a number of cases. This was nothing illegal. This was nothing. This was not a data breach. It was not a hack. It wasn't anything synonymous with Watergate. I've seen a lot of that stuff thrown in the media. It's none of those things.
Facebook knew. Facebook talked to these guys, and they were well aware of this data, the amount of data that was being captured by this application.
Like I've been struggling to think of an analogy that people can understand. Imagine, and I finally thought of one. Imagine if you're on Facebook or Twitter. Well, let's say with Facebook, because we're talking about Facebook, and you upload a picture of George Clooney as your profile picture. You have violated Facebook's terms of service, which is the same offense that company B committed in storing and transmitting this data. It's the same thing. It's a terms of service violation. That's really all that it amounts to. The exact same offense as if you put a picture of George Clooney that you didn't have rights to as your profile picture on Facebook.
We have a question on Facebook. I'm just gonna, speaking of Facebook, and I'll read this out. That has allowed itself to be a dark and slimy delivery system. Americans long have known how to deal with politicians on the back of the train.
Yeah, well, I think that's what you were saying is that the outrage should be. If you're going to be outraged, I would say be outraged at users of Facebook or Facebook itself.
I'd be outraged that Facebook's policy in 2014 was that somebody could have access to your friend's information through you agreeing to use an application. That's how that was policy is so beyond ridiculous that I don't even know where to start.
Right. Well, exactly. And something interesting, and it only comes to light because most people didn't even know about this, but something that's really interesting is something else that I didn't really understand the full brevity of, but if you use like a rewards card, like all those companies give you like loyalty points and rewards. Well, basically what they're doing in exchange for that, if you never read that, the fine print on that, what they're doing is in exchange for giving you discounts and stuff, you're giving them consent to sell your data, what you purchased. It goes to a company and that company can then sell it. That's why if you actually go to if you go to CVS and you buy cold medicine, or you buy Kleenex, like you're starting to get a cold, you buy Kleenex, you come home, you log on to Facebook, you're going to see an ad for cold medicine. Like, because CVS is asking you for your rewards number, and by giving them your rewards number, they can then tie you to a digital footprint and then upload into the cloud that you just bought Kleenex. And then advertisers can make assumptions based on the fact that you just bought Kleenex. So
yeah, I think what people, I think first off, people are upset because there's the political angle to it. But I think I think it's somewhat misdirected anger. And I think what people are really starting to realize is how much of their private data is being used by these companies to basically fund all of their operations. Like the only way Facebook is making money right now is by selling your data.
That's right. And it's one of those things.
And it's upfront about that. I mean, everyone knows that or has to know that at this point.
Yeah, I guess people don't understand the extent of how much they know now, and they know, just about everything. They buy this loyalty card information from CVS, Walgreens, all these other programs, and they make it available to us as Gunner Technology. We could, for example, put out an ad targeted at people within 50 miles of Stuart, Florida, who are exhibiting signs of a cold. We could do that.
Or who like pizza. We can target the pizza likers.
We could target the pizza likers. And we could target people not only who like pizza, but who are exhibiting behaviors that they're about to buy a pizza. I mean, that's what's really crazy. And so, yes, that is how Facebook makes its money. That is it. That is, I think, like 98% of its revenue comes from ads.
You are the product. You are the product on social media.
That's exactly right. So you kind of have to make a decision. do you like Facebook enough for it to make money off of you? If you don't, leave it and it'll shrivel up. It cannot survive without user data.
And I think that's the other realization that people are having, that is possibly where a lot of this misdirected anger is coming from, is just how willing people are to part with their private data. I think people want other people to cherish their personal information more than most people do. I think most people at this point, and especially the younger generations, not only don't care about their personal information being out there in the world, they explicitly want as much of their personal information to be out there as possible.
Right. And it's weird. And I was having this discussion with someone else, because you see this, I don't think, and again, this is not based on anything whatsoever, so feel free to disregard it, but empirically, it feels like there's never been a greater divide between the young generation and the older generation. It just feels like there's such a divide. And the problem is, if your audience is skewing older, as a company, you have to kind of keep that in mind. You have to kind of figure out a way to appeal to the younger audience, because your core audience is going to die off soon. By the way, this applies to Republicans whose constituency is much older than their core group.
Although, if the last election is any indication, they outperformed insanely in, I think, the 18 to 24 demographic, or might have been in the 18 to 30 demographic.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So they're doing something right. Well, and like you said, you have to.
And that's, yeah, exactly. And I think that they've kind of actually written off their core constituency, because they're not holding to the core values of the party anymore. They're really not. And so they've done it so dramatically that the John McCains, the Lindsey Grahams, the old guard, like, they're just kind of kicking them to the curb. It's really weird. Like CPAC, which is,
they're almost like villains now.
Right.
It's like Batman, the Dark Knight, where you live long enough to become the villain.
That's right. And it kind of goes to my point. What I was starting to say is that companies try to slowly start appealing to younger audiences while trying to keep their core constituencies, but they're so diametrically opposite that you can't. If you try to appeal to the younger audience, you alienate the older audience. So it's better to rip the Band-Aid clear. And this is what I'm saying. Like, you look at Jeff Flakes, you look at Lindsey Graham, you look at John McCain, you look at Bob Corker. These are all like establishment Republicans who have been forebearers of the party, who have basically, been villainized. And you had 2 years ago, Donald Trump wasn't even invited to CPAC, which is like the typical Republican conference. They were him and his ilk were shunned. Now they were they heralded them like champions this year and brought in Le Pen from France. Like, they've gone.
They're running the show.
They have gone 180, and they're like, forget the older audience. We're not even going to pretend. As a matter of fact, we're going to flip it around on them. And by flipping it around on them, we're going to make our younger constituents now hate them and come to this new republicanism even stronger. It's really weird. And
when your strategy gets Donald Trump elected, that's a whole lot of clout to be given to that strategy.
Right. Oh yeah. I mean, say what you will about the Steve Bannons of the world. They know, they understand this country. They understand, and technology.
Well, I was going to say, the reason that they understand the country is because they are using these big data techniques to explicitly understand this country. And Steve Bannon was, I think, a board member on Cambridge Analytica and was one of the leading strategists for the push to accrue as much data as possible and to target behavioral advertising in these hot districts that ended up pushing Donald Trump to the win. I mean, it was probably the most intelligent political campaign that's ever been run, simply because the intelligence was offloaded to this deep learning that was done on this massive amount of data.
Right.
And but I guess we should also point out that it wasn't the entirety of the Trump campaign. I mean, this was one sort of component of it, but it wasn't like this was all the Trump campaign did. But it certainly had an effect, and it certainly directed their strategy in a number of these key states.
Well, I think you make a good point there. We talked about this offline. Cambridge Analytica was originally hired by Ted Cruz, who obviously didn't win the Republican primary. And then they were later hired by the Trump campaign, who obviously did win the Republican primary. So again, marketing is a big aspect of it, but marketing generally can't make people who wouldn't do something do it if they weren't going to do it. So the fact that Donald Trump fits this style of marketing really well just augmented the effectiveness of it.
I'm not even sure I entirely agree with that, though. I think marketing can make people do something that they wouldn't otherwise do. I think that's where the real. I think that's part of the scary aspect of marketing is its power to actually influence people to act in ways they might not have acted otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, when you say that, I go back to the. It reminds me of this study. I'm sure you've heard of it, where they had a bunch of people, where like they had a group of people, and like 2 people in the group were actual participants, and like 6 or 8 others were plants, and they all handed out straws, and they were like, all right, who has the shortest straw? And some guy would obviously have the shortest straw, and everyone else would like point at one of the participants and be like, oh no, he's got the short straw. And at first the participants would be like, no, my straw is longer than that guy's over there. And they'd be like, no, it's clearly shorter. And eventually the person would be like, yeah, you're right, I got the short straw.
Yeah, no, the swayability of people never ceases to amaze.
That's
I mean,
true.
there's
true.
Innumerable experiments about that. There's the one about there's the one where they're giving shocks to people.
Oh yeah.
And there's it's the expert the power of authority is basically what the principle is, and it's there's a scientist there with a notepad, and there's a guy sitting at a console with a bunch of buttons, and each button is an increasing amount of voltage to give to somebody on the other side of the panel who you can't see. It's also an experiment in not being able to see the person that you're harming and how that makes people do stuff they otherwise wouldn't do. But basically, the scientist tells them to push a button to give the other person an electrical shock, and the person on the other side of the panel that you can't see starts screaming horribly, and the scientist basically just keeps telling the person to go higher and higher voltage to give the other person, as the other person is screaming their head off in clear, tremendous pain.
I want to leave. This is not an experiment.
Yeah, and the guy who's pushing the button is always just like, gosh, are you sure we should keep doing this? And the scientist is like, yeah, it's fine.
It's fine. Keep going.
And they're like, all right, well, you're the boss. And it's like they'll go almost like all the way to what they must imagine is like a terminal shock to give to this other participant in the study. But so I think there is a sense that, or there is an aspect of this, which is the more you know about somebody, the more you know how to affect the way that they're going to act. And they knew an unbelievable amount about people.
The big question is, though, because not everyone in these studies admitted they had or changed their mind about the straw, and not everyone in the electricity study kept going up in voltage. So the point is, not only did this political campaign encourage people to keep going higher in voltage, but they first identified the people who were most likely to keep going up in voltage.
Right. You only need a certain number of people to actually do it to make it effective.
Right.
And they knew exactly who would be the one to, the analogy would be push the highest voltage button and vote for Donald Trump.
Right. That's right. And it's crazy. It's a good experiment. So look at it from the outside and see how effective it is. And the real question is how is this going to affect future campaigns? I mean, because as long as people continue to use social networks like Facebook, this problem isn't going away. There's no way.
Well, and Cambridge Analytica doesn't need any more data.
That's right.
Like they have their, call it metadata at this point, that says exactly what people are like in certain areas, exactly what they like, exactly what they respond to. That can be used for the next 10, 20, 30 years until those demographics drastically change. And demographics are pretty stable within a zip code. It's amazing how stable demographics are over long periods of time. So, I mean, this data could be used for the next century.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And to your point, which again you made offline, this is also this is the type of stuff that the Russians did too. I don't know if they had intricate algorithm that Cambridge Analytics had, Analytica had, but they did have algorithms that said, okay, if we stage a Black Lives Matter rally in Central Florida, it's going to really rankle the residents there, and they're going to get out and vote for Donald Trump because they don't like the Black Lives Matter people. So that they did have that data, and so then they would say, okay, in this area of the country, if we stage a rally, it's going to initiate a backlash on the other side. So they were pretty methodical and sophisticated in their usage of data as well.
All right, so this topic is attracting a lot of attention. We have another question. What can be done to stop this? Which is a pretty broad question. And I don't honestly think there's an easy answer to what can be done to stop this, because even if you were to take some sweeping government reforms, I'm not even sure that's going to be A, effective, B, something you even want to do.
No, and the way you prevent this is to take personal responsibility. You inform yourselves, and
therein lies the problem.
Right.
Because I honestly don't think, and this might be a controversial opinion, that any of the data that was accrued by Cambridge Analytica wouldn't necessarily have been gladly given to them by the people whose data they accrued. As the 270,000 for sure said, take my data. The Friends network that they got access to, 75, 80% of them would have said, yeah, sure, you can have that. You want to know what I like? Yeah, that's fine. I don't care if you know what I like. In fact, I would love it if I got some attention from people who want to know what I like. That's why I'm on Facebook and I like all this stuff. I want people to know that I like Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Otherwise, why the heck would I like it in the first place?
Right. And I guess what I mean is, and I don't know how else to say it, is you kind of have to stop looking at Facebook as a fun place where you have to understand that people are not asking you to find out what superhero you are so you can have a laugh and share it with your friends. Because that technology that goes into building that app and running that app, it costs money. It costs money. They are making money somehow. And that somehow is they are selling your data, I guarantee it. And if you're okay with that, if you're okay with them using information about you to try to influence you, by all means, find out that you're like the Incredible Hulk. I don't care. But if
there's no such thing as a free lunch.
Right. If you have any problem with people using your data against you or to try to influence you to do something, then don't give the application access to your information, because you have to explicitly do it. You have to. So, just don't do it.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see what comes from it, but my guess is nothing. So I guess if nothing comes of it and people continue to use social media, and somebody says we need Daryl on Facebook says Tom at MySpace would know what to do, and I think he's the hero we need right now. We need to bring him back.
He's sipping Mai Tais on some obscure beach right now.
He's his only friend, though.
Totally.
But if people aren't going to stop giving their personal information away, and if we know that with enough personal data, you can build extensive psychological profiles of key demographics, and if we know that the combination of those two is going to produce targeted advertising that's going to completely change the way the politics, I don't even know, completely change. It's been done this way forever. It's just that it's being done in a more powerful manner. But if that's going to be the continuing evolution, is greater and greater or more and more nuanced advertising that's targeted towards specific demographics, is there anything that can be done to stop that beyond simply outlawing people from doing that?
No. And by the way, as you pointed out, people are the younger generations are more and more and more comfortable with giving their data away. As you said, they don't really have a problem with it. It's kind of we're like on that cusp, but definitely older than us. And some people our age are mortified by this. I guarantee you there's no 20-year-old or younger who's like, oh my gosh, this is horrible. Like, because they know and they want kind of this behavior, which is interesting because if they're expecting it, are they going to be as influenced by it? That's what's going to be interesting. Because if this generation who is gladly giving away their data, and really they know they're giving away their data because they were brought up like this, if they're not as influenced by these tactics, then they kind of lose their effectiveness from oversaturation, which is an interesting thing that I didn't think of.
So you're questioning the efficacy of marketing for the younger generation insofar as they know that their data is being used to explicitly target them for advertising?
So, and again, I wish I could point out the study, but I knew there were studies that basically said to people, okay, we are trying to influence you, and then they tried to influence them. The people who they told they were trying to influence were less likely to be influenced than if they just tried to influence the person. Do you see what I'm saying? So
yep.
If this younger generation expects to be tried to be influenced by their data, they, according to the study, would be less likely to be influenced because they're expecting to try to be influenced.
Who doesn't know they're trying to be influenced right now?
Oh man, well that's what I'm saying. Like if you see that steel,
I guess, yeah, that's true.
If you see that Steelworkers ad, you're like, oh, they're just trying to look out for me. They're not trying to, like, it's weird. People.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting. Yeah.
So I think that people in a macro sense understand that a lot of things are trying to influence them, but when they're actually confronted with it, they don't think I'm trying to be influenced right now. You see what I'm saying? On a micro level, I don't think
I think anyone who knows a millennial knows it's impossible to motivate them to do anything. So
that's right. That's right. So this will just die on the vine.
Yeah, that's the death of marketing right there. Maybe it's a blessing in disguise. It's tough, but it is like the actual application behind it is really interesting as just an example of how powerful the usage of deep learning and big data is. And then when the rubber meets the road, it's slightly disconcerting how powerful deep learning and big data is.
That's right. That's right. It can be very obviously influential, but it can be very useful. I mean, very, very useful in other applicabilities, which we talked about a lot on these episodes. But yeah, it can certainly be, people are saying weaponized, and it can be weaponized. I don't think it's, in this case, I don't think it's a weapon, but it can be influential for sure. There's no doubt about it. It can be more influential than just about anything.
All right, I'm going to read this so that we can end on the most depressing note. From Nielsen.com, millennials are most trusting when it comes to advertising.
Okay.
Whether watching TV, checking emails, or flipping through a magazine, it seems like everywhere we look, there's an opportunity for advertisers to connect with us, earn our trust, and deliver their message. Skip down a few lines. Millennials aged 21 through 34 who came of age with the internet have the highest levels of trust in online and mobile formats, followed closely by Generation X, ages 35 to 49. Millennials show the highest levels of trust in 18 of 19 advertising formats or channels, including TV, newspapers, and magazines, and they're also the most willing to take action on 16 of 19 formats.
That's amazing.
So I think we give up.
That's amazing. So what we're going to do is we're going to see a future like
the election of 2016
and like Minority Report, where you walk around like you're going to have like a robot handing you a coldies because it's going to know you have a cold. I mean, that's what we're headed for. If this next generation is even more susceptible to this type of influence than we are, then you can't do anything about it.
I swear to God, one of these episodes we're going to end on just the most joyous, happy, utopian note. But as it is, all of our episodes seem to come down to, my goodness, where is this heading, and we can't do anything about it. So on that happy note,
I mean, use Facebook for what it was originally invented for. Post stupid photos, post stupid memes, just post the most stupid stuff on Facebook, and don't take anything on Facebook seriously. I mean,
hey, you know where you can post stupid stuff and your information isn't used at all? Posthost. So make sure to check out posthost.co, and make sure to check out the Gunner Technology Livestream Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. But until then, we'll end you on the happy note of millennials are most trusting when it comes to advertising. That blows my mind. Anyways, thanks, Cody, for joining me.
Yeah,
we'll talk to you guys later.